Finish it! Hello there, it's Miles here from Expired Film Club. Thank you so much for joining me on today's video. I hope you're doing spiffingly well on this fine day. Thank you for joining me for a video today where I'm going to be exploring how I've managed to make a full-time career out of shooting film photography in 2024. If you're new to the channel, please do subscribe. I post film photography content all the time on the channel, and do like if you enjoy the video, and in the comments if I don't cover anything that you'd like to know and have a question, please let me know in the comments and I will do my absolute best to answer you. But with all that being said, let's get into the video. Basically, I have been asked to kind of show how I've managed to forge a career in film photography in the modern day. It's a bit of a juxtaposition really, because obviously we live in a very digital age. I shoot using old analog film cameras, some of which are like over 100 years old, and post the results on social media in collaboration with brands and with sports teams and with all that sort of thing. And it is my full-time job somehow. I've carved out this niche, and so I'm going to sort of explain in today's video how I've managed to make that a reality for myself and give you guys some advice if you're looking to forge a career in film photography in the modern day. Before I jump into it, first of all though, if you do like any of my photography and you'd like prints of any of my work, in the description down below is a link to my print store where you can buy framed or unframed versions of all of my favourite film photos that I've taken in the sporting world over the past year or so, and you can buy them. There's worldwide shipping, so you can go and hang them in your house or your office or wherever you'd like to really, or give them as a gift to somebody. And if you'd like to buy them, there's a link in the description down below, so go ahead and get yourself a print if you would like to. So I'm going to give you a kind of run through about how this has all evolved for me from the very start to now, where I'm working with some of the biggest sports brands in the world. I'm very lucky to be able to shoot with some sports teams like Manchester United, Real Madrid, just done some stuff with the New York Yankees and the NFL, with the NHL, with loads of stuff across my career so far, and hopefully ongoing. But it all started really, I guess, during the pandemic, funnily enough. COVID was where it started for me, which was kind of fortunate because I was working in the music industry before I started heading into the world of sport. Still do some stuff in the music industry as well. I cover festivals and do some shoots for bands and things like that on film. But before this all took off, I was working in the music industry doing photo and video work, obviously mostly in the digital space. I wasn't shooting a lot of film back then. I also did a bit of sound as well. But when the pandemic hit, I was furloughed and I had all this time on my hands, which was very fortunate. So I had some time to pursue a passion really. And I got really into shooting film. I had shot film in school. I studied photography in college here in the UK. I didn't go to university actually. I just thought I'd delve in straight into the industry and do it, which is one of the great things about these creative jobs, is you can just dive straight in and just gain experience that way. So that's the first sort of recommendation for me. Even if you are studying to do a degree, which I'm sure is fantastic as well, for my own personal experience, just diving in and just getting experience and doing it served me in very good stead. But so I was studying it in sixth form or college in the UK, and I hadn't really touched film photography in quite a few years, to be honest. And then the pandemic hit, and I can actually entirely blame my younger brother Dylan, because he had a birthday during the first lockdown here in the UK, and he said that he would like to get a 35mm film camera for his birthday. And that got my cogs whirring about maybe getting one myself and getting back into it. So I totally stole his thunder, and I went on Facebook Marketplace actually and found myself an old Olympus OM10, which I suppose you can class as my first real film camera that I got for Expired Film Club. So I bought that from a local old guy in my town here in Oxfordshire in the UK, and got some film. I think I just got the film off Amazon or something, and just started shooting film, and instantly just fell head over heels in love with shooting film. I love everything about it. And so that's where it kind of started. Through that, I then discovered expired film, which I can explain to you now. If you're not familiar with film, I'm going to go into my film fridge here. There's another tip, by the way, if you shoot film. Try and keep it in the fridge, helps keep it fresh. So I've got an entire fridge here full of film, and let's see, if I grab a roll of film that I've got in the fridge right now. This is probably my favorite color film. This is Kodak Portra 800, and on every single roll of film, if you turn the box over, you can see right there, that is an expiry date. So this expires in August of 2026. All rolls of film have an expiry date, and basically what that is it's kind of like a best by date. So it's a bit like medicine film. It's best stored cold, and also after a while the potency gets lower and lower in essence. So after August of 2026, the potency of this film will go down, and that means it becomes less responsive to light, but it also means you can get loads of weird effects if you shoot a roll of expired film. It can be really grainy, the colors can shift, and it can go all wild and weird. And I sort of discovered expired film early on when I was, experimenting with my Olympus OM10 and rolls of film I quite like to shoot, and I got really into the idea of trying old rolls of expired film. So I ordered myself some rolls online. I think I got them on eBay possibly, and they arrived. And I started posting on social media. TikTok was really the first place I started posting. I was probably posting stuff on there for a few months, just general stuff. I was sort of experimenting and finding what worked in terms of my content output, and just trying out different things. And so another tip I would say for this and trying to make yourself a career in film photography is utilizing social media, because I think you kind of have to nowadays. For me, I sort of started treating social media like it was my portfolio in a way, just posting my stuff on there. Obviously I had an Instagram account that I started posting to as well. And I was very strict with myself early on. Again, luckily I had the time to be, because obviously I was still furloughed at the time. But I sort of said to myself I was going to post every day to TikTok, so once a day to TikTok, and then that short form video I'd also post to Instagram Reels, but supplementing that with 2 feed posts a day on Instagram as well. And what I did to start with actually is I was sharing other people's photos shot on expired film and giving them credit for it, and reposting and building up a bit of a community that way. And so I was doing that, like I say, for a few months and trying to figure out what was working, until I had my first ever kind of viral moment, I suppose. Me and my wife, Catherine, were on holiday down in Cornwall, which is on the south coast here in the UK. And I said to her, hey, would you mind filming a little video over my shoulder of me loading a roll of film, as in, sort of first person perspective. So I had this roll of expired film, so I sort of did the whole thing where I took it out of the box, put it in my camera, and then showed the view through the viewfinder, and then the results at the end of it. And so yeah, I got my wife to film that for me, and it instantly did really well. It was, I suppose, a kind of perfect storm of stuff. It was over this really picturesque cove in Cornwall, and obviously I was shooting a weird roll of film on an old film camera, and I think it just must have captured people's attention. Anyway, it ended up getting a couple of million views, in a few days after I posted it, which was amazing. And so that was the moment where I thought, okay, I found my little niche content area possibly, and this style develops of those POV videos showing the film, showing the results through the viewfinder. And I thought, okay, I'll just keep doing this more and more. And so after that video, I then started repeating that style of content, but in different places, using different rolls of film, using different cameras, and it just kept gaining traction. It's amazing. So I think, if there was another tip for me, if you're utilizing social media, what I obviously did was this kind of repeatable content style, so that I think people would see those type of videos. And in the end, obviously, after my wife had filmed the first video, I actually got a little chest mount just for my phone off Amazon, and that's how I get. So my phone is like on my chest like this, and I'm loading a roll of film in first person perspective. And I suppose that became my kind of style, and so people saw those videos come up on their feeds and maybe instantly assumed it was me at the very start, which was nice. And so yeah, that would be another tip early on, is just experiment at the start with your content and your strategy and what you're posting. And when you find something you think that works and that connects with people and that you enjoy, just run with it and try and do that as much as possible. So that's exactly what I did. Yeah, and things just kept gaining traction. And so from that, luckily, I started getting a bit of a social media following. The TikTok grew way faster than I could ever have imagined. And I think I hit 1 million followers within just about a year of my first post, which is outrageous. I can't believe that actually happened. But I put that down to those 2 things. Consistency, posting once a day, even if it's not once a day you can post, but just trying to consistently feed stuff into your profile, and finding that unique content style that came out of a good idea, I think, and that people can define as your content, but also keep people engaged with it. And I think that was one of the things about the videos that I do, is that makes you want to stick to the end to see the results, if you see what I mean. Yeah, so it just kept snowballing and going from there and going from strength to strength. At this point, obviously, it wasn't full-time for me, and I wasn't really making very much money off the socials whatsoever. What I did do was have a store on my website where I started selling expired film boxes, so you could get like lucky dip boxes of rolls of expired film, and that did start to become like a full-time income for me after a while because the socials were growing that much, which was great. But in terms of me as a photographer, I was just taking random photos of like, you know, nature or I don't know, wherever I happened to be. But yeah, it wasn't a full-time job for me yet. But from that, I then started thinking, well, I could try and make it into a full-time job. So alongside photography, sport is my real passion, football particularly, but really any sort of sport, I just love it. With that in mind, I just started taking my film cameras to sports games. So I'd be on holiday and maybe go and watch a baseball game, and I'd bring, you know, a little point and shoot camera with me and do my style of video. There's first person perspective videos from the crowd, taking some photos on film of the baseball game, or going to a football game and doing the same thing. And so I just started doing that, and as I was doing it, I was tagging the clubs in it and some of the players I was shooting and stuff, just on the off chance they might see it and enjoy it. And again, I was doing that for a while, and then finally, the video I think that really sparked everything for me, I posted a video where I went to watch a Fulham game with my younger brother Dylan, and I was there thanks to a guy on Instagram whose handle is @football35mm, so he's called Jamie, and he worked at the time for a brand called Copper 19. He said, you know, we got talking on social media, and again, this is honestly harnessing social media. That was the crux of it for me. If there's anything you want to take away from this entire video, try and get there on socials. It's so funny shooting film to post on social media because it feels like a weird juxtaposition, like I said, but social media was it. And so through Instagram DMs, I started chatting to this guy, Jamie, and he invited me. He said, I've got a couple of tickets spare for this Fulham game. It was Fulham versus Nottingham Forest. And obviously it was just to go and sit and watch the game from the stands. But he said, I've got a couple of tickets if you want to come along. And I was like, yeah, that sounds amazing. So went along. Again, I did some of my content from the stands, had my film cameras with me, just again, a little point and shoot with some black and white film, and did one of my videos where I showed the POV, shoot the stadium, show the results at the end of it, and posted it on socials. And that point was the point where a club finally saw one of the videos that I posted, and Fulham, the official Fulham FC account, saw it and got in touch with me and said, hey, we really like this video. Do you mind if we repost it on our Instagram and give you credit? And I was like, of course, that sounds great. So that collaboration thing started happening from there, really. So that went out, did really well, luckily. I can't remember how many views it got, but you know, it did well. And so from that was the sort of first point of building my reputation as a sports film photographer, I guess. So that was great. So that was towards the end of the season, and that would have been the season before last. That would have been 22, 23, I guess. And so in between that and when I started doing it professionally, you know, I now had some contact details at the club, and this is another thing that I'd recommend is, you know, trying to infiltrate and find contact details within the places that you want to work, whether that's sports or anything else. You know, finding those people that you can talk to and potentially pitch yourself for stuff is really important. Anyway, me and Fulham, or whoever the guy was running the Fulham FC Instagram account, you know, DM'd every now and again. And it got to the point where I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to ask them if I can go along and, you know, shoot a game for them properly and be, you know, an accredited photographer. So I did. I shot my shot and they said yes, which was amazing. So I said, yeah, do you want me ever to come along and shoot an actual game? And I didn't know whether it was going to be, you know, whether I'd be on the touchline, whether I'd just be in the stands shooting some stuff of the fans and things like that. But whatever it was, I was like, this is going to be a great connection to make, and to work with the Premier League club that closely can only be a good thing. The worst that can happen is people say no, or, you know, it's so worth just like I say, just shooting a shot, putting yourself out there, even if it's not, you know, at the start you don't aim for the very top level. If you're into sports, just start contacting some local clubs, some players of local clubs, you know, slinging them a DM on Instagram with, you know, some of your work visible on your page or whatever like that. And, you know, all that can happen, well, the worst that can happen probably is that they just don't come back to you, in which case you've not lost anything. But the worst really after that is that they can say no, and you're like, okay, well, that's fine. And you just keep going and going. And anyway, with Fulham, luckily they said yes. So I got there with my equipment and got my accreditation, and it was amazing. I was pitch side. I had a position behind one of the goals, which was absolutely incredible. So did my thing, went down and shot the content, did my, you know, POV, film loading video, showed the results, got the film all processed, and luckily it all came out really nicely. So a few days after the game, once I got everything back from the lab and edited the video and everything, posted it to my Instagram, invited the Fulham account as collab, which they accepted, and so it appeared on both of our feeds, and that was the moment that everything changed, I think, because there I was, pitch side at a Premier League game, shooting for a Premier League club in collaboration with them. And so that just started the ball rolling. Some of the players who played saw the video and liked it. Other teams obviously would have seen it at that point. And that just, it started the snowball effect of other teams looking at it and seeing it and thinking, hey, let's get this guy in, getting in touch. So West Ham United got in touch after that, and I did some stuff with them. And it kept going and going from there. And it all started from just finding that consistent, engaging content style on social media and just shoot a shot and go from there. So all that being said, again, to make the most of it, I felt like I had to have a good professional equipment list. And so I have now collected around me a gear list of stuff that is nice and professional and gets me great results. So I'm going to talk you through some of the equipment that I've got. I'm going to go from the kind of base level stuff all the way up to the really professional grade equipment that I have. But to be honest, if you're starting out and you want to be shooting stuff at sports games or at music or wherever you are, any sort of film camera that you have will do a job. But obviously, if you want to start at the bottom and work your way up to getting this professional gear, I'll show you all the best ways to go about that. So to start with, if like me, you want to go along to these games or these events and just shoot some stuff from the crowd or from just the average ticket places, normally sports stadiums won't let you in with what they deem a professional camera. So that's normally something that's interchangeable lens, or if it is interchangeable lens, not one with a telephoto zoom lens on it. And so just for safety, most of the time, if you're going and sitting in the crowd at a game or a concert or all of these sorts of things where there's going to be security searching stuff and potentially telling you to take your professional camera and put it in a locker, a point and shoot is the way to go. So I'll show you one of the point and shoots that I used for the Fulham game, because you can find little compact point and shoots with a zoom lens attached, which are perfect for that. So I'm going to go grab that and show you how it works. Okay, here we go. This is a fantastic point and shoot camera for going into a crowd at a concert or at a sports game and still being able to get some nice results. This is a Canon SureShot Z135, and this camera is great because it has a zoom lens element in it. So it's a 38 to 135 millimeter lens. If you can see on the front there, it's a bit old and battered, this. But something like this is absolutely perfect to take because it's a compact camera. They're not going to confiscate it off you because it's just a little point and shoot. But when you turn it on and you can zoom all the way into 135 millimeters, you can get some decent stuff. The only thing about using cameras like this, and this is a great rule of thumb when you go into sports games or concerts or anything that's going to be at night or inside under floodlights, is you're going to want nice high ISO film to use in these. And this goes for whether you're using kind of more amateur, like consumer level cameras like this, or professional gear. High ISO stuff is really good. So stuff like Portrait 800, if you can find yourself some 800 ISO color film, that's great. Or you could even go one higher and find yourself some Ilford Delta 3200 or Kodak P3200, which is 3200 ISO black and white film. I can't find any 35mm versions of it right now, but there's a 120 version of the Delta 3200. So nice high ISO film in a camera like this, and you should be good to then start taking some stuff from the crowd at events. It's so easy to use as well. You can just stick it. It's got like an automatic mode on the back of it. So really, just whack it in auto. Sometimes they don't like using flash though, so you best turning the flash off and then just snapping away and seeing what you can get. But this was essentially, this very camera was the one that got me my start in the sports world from the crowd, shooting some stuff on black and white using a zoom compact little point and shoot. Was the perfect way to start. So I would highly recommend finding something like this or just something similar. This isn't the only version of this sort of camera you can get. I know Pentax makes some good ones, and there are lots of little compact point and shoots with zoom lenses that will do a perfectly good job if you wanted to get into it that way. So after a compact point and shoot, and after you've started to get your footing, you might want to look at investing in an SLR or an interchangeable lens camera. And I've got a couple up here that I can show you that are great for just getting started in that world of film photography as well. So a range of cameras that I think are fantastic value for money if you're looking for an interchangeable lens SLR are the Canon EOS range. Now this, to you guys, might look like this is a digital camera, and that's essentially because it kind of is, just without the digitalness to it. So you can see in the back it takes film, but it's a very modern looking camera, and these were kind of late model Canon cameras before they completely stopped making 35mm film cameras. And as you can see, this takes EF mount lenses, which means it takes very, very modern lenses. Just obviously take the body cap off and you can attach lenses there, but it means that you can get into the SLR world with a camera that's nice and easy to use. You've got loads of options for settings on the dial here. You can just stick it in automatic mode even if you want to, and then you can attach any lenses you want really. There are loads of Canon EF lenses that you can get online, and obviously, you know, if you're going to a concert and you're doing some more professional stuff, zoom lenses are great. Just bear in mind that they might be a bit touchy with letting you in with a camera like this. But you know, if you're wanting to then, you know, start shooting some stuff semi-professionally, some portrait shoots, or all that sort of thing, these are amazing. You can find, so this is a Canon EOS 100, but you can find the sort of Canon EOS range because they did a lot of different bodies of this style, and you can find them on eBay for like 10-15 quid for the body. And then, you know, if you get yourself a nice little nifty 50mm f1.8, which again you can find for nothing really on eBay, and you've got yourself a very, very capable SLR setup to start shooting film a little bit more professionally. And so I'd always recommend going up to something like this. I mean, you could even start with this, to be honest, without using a point and shoot. The only thing about this is because it is kind of looking like a professional camera, that the security at some stadiums and things like that might not let you in with it, which would be a shame. But these are fantastic starter SLRs to go up from there. And to be honest, once you're on these and you've got Canon EF lenses, you can move up the EOS range of camera bodies to start getting some more professional bodies and still be able to use the same lenses, which is amazing. So yes, Canon EOS range of bodies are fantastic to use. Now, let's talk about lenses. So like I mentioned, obviously if you're trying to get into somewhere with a professional camera, you want a smaller lens for it. So like a 50mm lens is great. But if you're starting to shoot stuff more professionally in the music or sports world or anything like that, you're going to want some lenses that start to get more expensive and bigger. So here's what I use. So in this little case is a Canon EF 70-200mm f2.8, and this, I would say, is the best all-round lens you could buy for any type of situation, in my personal opinion. So it obviously has a zoom range of 70-200mm. It's got an aperture, constant aperture of f2.8. The zoom barrel is internal, so it doesn't move in and out. It's autofocus, it's got a stabilizer, and it's just a fantastic piece of kit. And so I use this all the time. This pretty much always stays on my cameras at sports games and everything else, to be honest, because it's just so reliable and a fantastic piece of gear. So, but something in this zoom range is a great lens to buy for all occasions, really. 70-200mm f2.8. So I have one of these. I also have a bit of a bigger lens on this camera here. So this is another Canon EOS body. This is an EOS 1, and this has got a 300mm f4 on it. It's also got a tele extender, a 2x tele extender, which essentially makes the lens a 600mm f8, which is only really useful in day games because obviously you need that extra light. But having that big zoom lens to be able to get stuff if the action's at the other side of the pitch is really important. So a nice big telephoto lens I always have in my arsenal as well. And then to complete the set, this is another Canon EOS body that I use. This is an EOS 3, and this is attached to a 16-35mm f2.8. So obviously it's a lot wider, and I love using this for big wide shots of stadiums. If player celebrations come up close to me and I need to react quickly because they're really in like close quarters, this is perfect for it as well. And so that's the sort of three lenses that I always have on camera bodies. I'd also love a 24-70, just so it means that you've got basically the entire focal range covered by the lenses that you have. But so normally when I'm at a game, what I have is I'll have the three different camera bodies. I'll have the big long telephoto lens attached to a camera and attached then to a monopod, which I'll show you in a second. And then the other two I've got strapped to my shoulders. So I've got the 16-35 on one shoulder, 70-200 on the other, so I can flip them and use whatever I need that's necessary for whatever shot I'm trying to get. So I said I use a monopod on the touchline as well, which if you know what a tripod is, you can probably work out what a monopod is. Essentially a tripod, but just with one leg. And the one that I use at the moment, which is fantastic, is this. It's an iFootage Cobra 3. And this is amazing because you can see it's a single-legged tripod, but it does have these 3 legs at the bottom that flip out like this, so you can rest it nice and easily on the touchline and not have to worry about it falling over. Plus, what's great about this is when you're shooting from the touchline, what I'm doing all the time is obviously swapping between cameras, and so what you need is the monopod camera at eye level, but you don't want to keep it there all the time because if the action starts to come close to you, you need to drop it quickly and then switch to, you know, the 70-200 or the 18-35. So what this monopod is great at, it's got this little button here that means you can just extend and de-extend the monopod really quickly, which is so handy for the games because, you know, if let's say I'm shooting something down the other end and I've got the monopod up to my eyes like this, you know, shooting the action down the other end, and then suddenly the ball's launched towards me, I can just literally flip it down, put it to one side and grab the other cameras as I go. So this is a great bit of kit. I'll leave a link to this in the description actually because it's really, really helpful for me on the touchlines. Just so easy to use. And then you can also attach, you know, more like heavy sort of tripod heads. This is again something from iFootage, the Komodo KS5 to be precise. But otherwise you can just attach your camera right to the top of it. And it's great because it clicks into place like this, and you've just got a monopod that can be used for all occasions. So that's very handy. And then obviously otherwise I've got loads of film that I use with me. So I've got everything in my film fridge here, but typically what I've got is loads of 800 speed color film and loads of 3200 speed black and white film mostly. Have other bits and pieces here and there as well if I'm doing a day game and there's bright sunshine and I don't need that much ISO. But that is kind of my overall gear list that I take to games. I also do use some older cameras, which I'll show you now. So this is my trusty Canon F1. I love this camera so much from the 1970s. Attached to it right now is a 55mm f1.2 lens, which I love. And it's also got a power winder on the bottom of it. So it means that it just flings through the film really quickly, which is amazing. So that's always in my arsenal as well. And then alongside that, I'll have my weird and wonderful cameras, you know, that are like 120 years old, just to get some unique content with those as well. So this is one of them. This is a 130-year-old panoramic film camera, which is amazing. Basically, this creates a panorama by literally swinging the lens like that, which is so cool. It's called a #1 Kodak Panoram. So I have this with me to get some panoramic shots of the stadium, and this always goes down well on socials. And I've also got this. This is another old Kodak camera. This is an 1897 #4 cartridge Kodak, which you pull out like that and it becomes this beautiful old camera that I've adapted to take medium format film in the back of it. So I'll sometimes use this at games as well, which again goes down really great if you're shooting a team that's really old or a stadium that's really old, you know, having these cameras with me to create some unique content. Yeah, and that's about it. The only other camera body, which I'm going to go and get from my cabinet now, which is, I think, my all-time favourite film camera. There's an argument for this being the best film camera of all time. And it's not talked about as much as it should be in respect to other cameras for me. It is the Canon EOS 1V. Got the battery grip attached to it, which adds really fast FPS. You can take loads of photos in a second, but this is just glorious. It's designed literally to be an absolute workhorse professional camera. So it was designed to be used for sports and news, I think, when it was released. Obviously, it takes 35mm film in the back like this. That's how fast you can take photos. I think it takes about 6 FPS when it's fully loaded. And it's just beautiful. So I always have this on the 70-200mm lens, actually, is kind of what I use it for mostly. And I would say this is my most used camera. It is just a glorious, glorious piece of gear. All my cameras and lenses, by the way, I get from camerastore.com, which I have an affiliation with. You can use my code EXPIREDFilmClub for 5% off. And again, I'll leave a link to them in the description of this video as well. They deliver worldwide. They're based in Europe, and they're just absolutely fantastic. And this EOS 1V I got from them, and I've used it so much, and it's just the absolute best. So if you want to get yourself one or any other film camera, they've got the biggest stock in all of Europe and quite potentially the world. I went to visit their warehouse recently and it's absolutely amazing. Go and grab yourself 5% off with my code. I'll leave a link in the description. So that rounds off all the equipment that I use, and to get the best photos, obviously I have certain settings and techniques that I like to use when I'm shooting. Essentially for me, a lot of the time, I want to keep the shutter speed at 1/500th of a second or above. And that's why I like to use the higher ISO films, because it means obviously you've got higher ISO, they're letting more light into the film. So you can have higher shutter speeds. I also always want to use lenses that are nice and fast, so f2.8 or below ideally. Obviously the 300mm f4 that I've got isn't quite that, but I'll normally pair that with some Ilford Delta 3200 film to make up for the lack of the aperture in the lens. But aside from that, with film, obviously I've afforded the luxury, I guess, of not having to get the shots that everyone else is getting and posting immediately. So I always try and tell a bit of a cinematic story. And this is another tip that I would give, you know, if you're trying to shoot film, is you want to make yourself stand out from the crowd. First of all, shooting film does that anyway, I think, because obviously there's a lot of digital photographers who are doing their thing, which is great, you know, for social media and for the news and all that sort of stuff. But just shooting film in the first place helps you stand out. But also, I think you always want to try and just give a unique look at the game or at whatever you're shooting through your own eye. So although you're shooting film, try and give it a bit of an angle, try and tell a nice cinematic story, try and, you know, get angles that nobody else is getting, try and, you know, turn the camera a different way sometimes to see reactions of the fans or of different players rather than the person who's got the ball, and just try and get your own, you know, sort of unique style. It's something that you can't really get without just going out and shooting, and so hopefully over time, you know, you'll develop your own style and you'll figure out what it is you're trying to say and what you're trying to do with the photos, and that would be my only other bit of advice really as well, is just to try and develop your own unique style to make you stand out from the crowd. One of the ways you can do that obviously is your post-processing workflow. Now the thing with film is it looks great anyway because you're shooting film, and so it has that old school vintage vibe to it either way. But the last bit of this video that I'd like to show you is my own post-processing workflow. This is once I've shot the game, once I've sent the rolls of film off to the lab, and once I've got my scans back on a download, I'm going to show you exactly what I do to get my photos ready to post on socials in collaboration with all these big clubs and hopefully give them a bit of an edge. So I'm going to show you that now. So I'm going to turn to my screen and I'm going to show you my workflow. Okay, so I'll now turn my attention to my computer screen here, where I have got open the latest version of Adobe Photoshop, which is my choice of post-processing software that I like to use. If you'd like to download it for yourself, by the way, I've got a link in my description of this video, so go ahead and check it out because there's loads of amazing new features in Photoshop that I love to use. So what I'm going to do now is just talk you through a little bit about how I would post-process and edit a film photo that I've taken from a game to send it out to the clients, and if they want some special things doing to it, how I do that, how I get it ready for posting in landscape and in portrait, and all that sort of stuff as well. So to start with, this is a photo of a game that I shot recently for Ajax in Amsterdam. It was a Legends match against Real Madrid, and this is a photo of Siem de Jong, who is clearly celebrating having just scored a goal. So this is, I suppose, probably my favourite photo of the day, I would say. It's always nice to be in the right place at the right time to catch a celebration, and so this worked out quite well for me, I think. So the first thing I will tend to do with photos like this is go into the sort of cropping and composition, because although it's a nice moment that I've captured here and I'm happy with how it's come out, the only thing I would say is that it's not 100% symmetrical, because you can see on the right, his left hand, I suppose, is not quite meeting the same point of the frame as his right hand, and also you can kind of see here a little silhouette of a Real Madrid player, which I think would be better without that being there. So all I'll do here is go to the crop tool on the left hand side. I've got it automatically set at the minute to 16:9, or 9:16 I should say, which we don't want to do for now, but I'm going to put it to the original ratio, which means that it will keep the ratio of this photo when I sort of stretch it and crop it down. So as you can see, if I start to drag it, the whole frame gets moved rather than just that right hand side, which is very useful, and that's what we want. So I'm just going to crop it in so that his left hand is kind of reaching about the same point as his right hand, and it just makes it that bit more symmetrical, and I'm happy with that, so I'll press enter. Now at this point, once I've got the composition and stuff as I'd like to, I'm pleased actually that the horizon line, you can see the advertising boards there, look straight to my eye, which is great. So the second thing I'll do is then start to maybe manipulate a little bit of the colours and just give it a bit more of a kind of in-depth editing if I think it needs it. So what I'll do here is go up to filter, and then I'll go to the camera raw filter, and this will bring up a whole load of options about how you'd like to edit your photo. So you've got obviously all the light and the colour and the effects and lots of stuff here. I don't tend to do that much when I'm editing a photo that I've shot on film, because obviously the great thing about shooting on film is that it kind of looks great straight out of the box, you know. So what I've got here is it's a raw scan from the film lab that I used called Analog, actually, in Amsterdam. And this is just, you know, as it's come from the lab. And so typically I don't tend to do too much to these sorts of photos, but there are a couple of things I would like to do to this one. First of all, I think that it's kind of got a bit of a green tinge overall. So what I'm going to do is go down to color here, and this will be controlled by the tint slider, as you can see here. So what I would do is just tease it up into the kind of more purpley range, and you can see there it's starting to get a bit more of a neutral feel to it, which I'm happy with. You can tell mostly by Siem de Jong's skin tone on his face. By the way, if you want to check your before and after on a Mac, you press the kind of backwards slash key, it's by the enter key, so I'll press that, and you can see already, I think that's actually made quite a big difference to the overall vibe of the photo. I'm happier with the tone of it. You can also tell because he's wearing a white shirt that the whites on his shirt are looking a bit more natural to me, which is great. So I might do that. Another thing I might do as well is go down here to the detail, and I might just give it a little bit of sharpening. As you can see, if you take it all the way up with film, it tends to really accentuate the grain, but we don't want it to look that grainy. So I tend to kind of keep the sharpening around about 20, maybe 18 actually would do a decent job there. And again, you can check the before and after. I like to sharpen up a photo if I crop into it a little bit, just to make sure it's, you know, sharp, essentially. Funnily enough, that's what the sharpness feature does. So, and then color-wise, here's a little tip. If you shoot on expired film a lot and you get a scan back and it's really washed out, this one I wouldn't say is particularly washed out. I'm kind of happy with how the colors are looking, but there's a little trick you can do, almost with any film photo, but particularly with expired film, if it gets that really washed out look. There are two things really. First of all, what I quite like to do is go into the dehaze option, which you will find in effects, and you can see there's a dehaze slider here. If you take it all the way down, you can see that that kind of actually looks a little bit like it was shot on expired film. If you take it all the way up, it gets a bit too vivid. But I like to bring a little bit of dehazing in to a film photo. If I've shot on expired film, or if I think it's looking a bit washed out, the dehaze feature is a nice one to have in there. Again, I'm going to check the before and after just to make sure we haven't, you know, done too much to this photo, and I'm liking how that's looking right now. Again, you can add other things like texture and clarity, but I tend to keep those as they are because, again, when you're dealing with grain, you can see how much the grain gets accentuated when you bring it up. One of the things that won't really work on a film photo is noise removal, and so you find that down here in the detail tool underneath sharpening, the noise reduction. It doesn't really do the job that you'd want it to because it starts to look a bit too clean and manipulated, and I think you can tell, you know, you can see here from when I'm doing these sliders, I think you can start to tell that it's been noise removed. And also the thing with the film photo, like I said, is that the grain adds to it. So I never touch the noise reduction on film photos just because that grain is really part of what makes a film photo a film photo. So I'm leaving that as it is. So the other tip, if you're shooting on expired film, like I was saying, to bring the most out of the colors, is to go into the curve box here, and you have a curve option just for an overall, and then you've also got the red, green, and the blue channels. This is where it really comes into its own, because if you click on each of these channels, what you'll tend to see, particularly with expired film, is the first sort of peak on the graph comes quite a long way from the left-hand side. Obviously, this was shot with, I think, relatively fresh film, so you can see it's not that far in from the left-hand side. If you're shooting with expired film, it might be, you know, somewhere around here or even here. And one of the things you can do to really get the best out of the colors of a film photo on expired film is to drag the shadow dot here and just bring it to the point where it starts to reach the peak of that first peak of the color. So if you do that with the red, and then you go to the green, and you do the same thing, just drag it in. Again, just as it's starting to peak, not at the actual very peak, because you want to retain some of the information in the shadows there, but just as it starts to climb up on the graph, and again, we'll do the same with the blue, then you can see here that I think, again, that's really made a lovely difference to the colors, and pretty subtle, you know, in terms of looking at it. I don't think you'd necessarily know, but it just really makes it bring out those colors as much as possible that are there. I learned that tip from watching my friend Linus and his camera on YouTube. He's done some stuff with Cine Still before, and he was showing this tip, and I think it's a fantastic tip to get the most out of some washed out expired film photos. Sometimes it can have a real color cast that leans a lot more towards one color. So by doing that, you're neutralizing that, you're bringing the most out of the colors, and really, I think that is looking pretty darn good in terms of the color grading. Again, I haven't done too much, and what I'm trying to do is kind of make it almost look like there's not been any edits applied to it, because I don't want to ruin the, you know, the beauty of the film photo. So the before, a little bit washed out, a little bit green, The after, I think, just looks a lot more natural, and I'm really happy with how that looks. So I think I'm going to leave it there in terms of what I would do to this photo in terms of the kind of more destructive editing. So I'm going to press enter, and that's going to save the changes. Looking very nice indeed. So at this point, I'd be quite happy to send this photo off for approval and to send it to the club and for them to use for however they'd like in landscape format. So what I'm going to do now is save this photo as a JPEG to be able to send to the client. On a Mac, you press Shift Command S. On a PC, it would be Shift Control S, and it will throw out the dialog box for you to be able to save this photo, and you can choose the formats and stuff. Now, to start with, it's going to throw up the format to be a Photoshop file because obviously it wants to save the progress, but I don't need to do that. So I go to Save a Copy, and this is where you can choose to save it as a JPEG. You just click the Format drop down, go down to JPEG, or any other format you'd like to save it as, but I tend to send these photos as JPEGs if they're going to be used on social media. And then at that point, you can then choose when you want to save the photo. So I'm going to go into my special folder in my hard drive here, Expired Film Club and IX Legends. And I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this Edits for Approval. So I'll create that. And then at this point, you need to give it a name. So this one, I'm going to say it's called CM de Jong Landscape. I'm going to click save, and then you get some options about how you'd like to save the JPEG file. I always tend to keep it at the maximum quality at 12. Format options baseline, don't really change anything about the matting, and that will be it for me. So I'm going to click OK. Photoshop will do its thing, and it will save the photo into that folder. So let's go and find it on my hard drive system here. I'll go to my hard drive, I'll go to the right folder, we'll go to Edits for Approval, and there he is, looking lovely, happy with that. So the other thing about this is that sometimes if I'm working with a client, or even for myself, I'd quite like to post one of my favorite photos to my story to include a link to the full video or a link to maybe buy a print or something like that. And obviously this doesn't really work as a story image because it's not in 9:16. So I'm going to use a bit of Photoshop's AI capability here, which is great for stuff like this, because if I want to extend this frame out to make it a portrait 9:16 image, I can use the generative expand tool on the new version of Photoshop, which is amazing. The first thing I need to do is again go to the crop tool here, and this is where I choose my ratio to be 9:16, and I can actually type it in this little ratio bit here, 9:16, and it will create a 9:16 crop. Now, if I was to crop it down like that straight away, I think that's a bit too zoomed in, and I think you're losing a lot of what the photo is, you know, with his arms out wide. Also, you haven't got a lot of headroom or anywhere to put links or text or anything like that. So I'm going to go Command Z or Control Z to undo. I'm going to click again on the crop tool. I'm just going to extend this frame out enough that I think I'll be able to add something at the top of it, whether that's text, a link, anything I like really. That's what I'm going to do. By default here, it's set to fill as transparent, which we don't want. We actually want to do a bit of a generative expand. You can also use a content aware fill, which is a similar thing on Photoshop. But for now, we're going to do the generative expand because that means that it will use Photoshop's AI ability to kind of predict what you'd like above the image as you're expanding it and hopefully make it look seamless. So I'm going to press enter, and that will throw up this dialog box, which gives you a prompt. If you wanted to write a prompt here, you could. So I could say something like add stadium roof or something like that. But if you just leave it clear at this point, Photoshop will generate something based on what it thinks the image would like to look like. And that's what I'm going to do right now. So I'm going to click generate, and we're going to see what the Photoshop AI can come up with. Okay, so it'll throw you up 3 variations to start with. I'm not sure what's going on with that one, but I'm going to delete that because I don't really like it. These ones with the lights are kind of cool. I mean, that one particularly, I quite like it's added a light there. I'm not sure why it has, but I do quite like that. And to be honest, it does look a bit natural. You know, it's extended the blurry crowd behind him in the darkness. This one is a bit too obvious with that light, I think, but this I think actually works really nicely. You know, I'm not sure why it's added the light there, but I kind of like that it has. So the other thing you can do at this point is if you're not quite happy with the generations that Photoshop AI has generated for you, you can give it another prompt. So at this point, maybe if I put remove light and click generate again, let's see if it's going to get rid of the light and make it look a bit more natural. And there we go, it's done it straight away. Amazing stuff. So we now have those variations from before, which we can go back to if we like, or we've got 3 new ones where there's no light added. And to be honest, I think this first one actually looks really good. Looks very natural again. It kind of looks like just the light is dying away. as the stand goes further up, and I am happy with that, I would say. So I'm going to click enter. It gives you a crop preview, at which point you can, extend it more if you want to, but I'm going to click enter one more time, and there we go. So this one I can use to post on stories. I'm actually really happy with how this has come out, to be honest. I think that's looking really nice. So at this point, again, I'm not going to make any changes, I don't think, and I'm going to throw up the save dialog box again, so Shift-Command-S or Shift-Control-S. I'm going to go save a copy, and we need to select JPEG as the format. I'll find that same folder that I just used for the previous one, Edits for Approval. I'll click on this to take that name, and rather than landscape, I'm just going to call it story. Because obviously it's going to be in story, same settings as before, click OK, and Photoshop will save the file. And if we go back to that same folder in the hard drive, it should be sat there alongside the first edit. There it is, and that's how it looks in all its glory. And so I would do this with a select number of photos from each game that I shoot. I wouldn't actually make a lot of them into this story size because I don't need to really, but again, if a client asks, if a club asks if I could make a photo that's not in 9:16, to make it 9:16, the generative expand feature on Photoshop is really, really helpful for that. And I think it's the best around at, generating something that looks really realistic, as you could tell from what we just did. Otherwise, the landscape photos like this one are what I would generally do. So I'd just go through, basically I sift through all the photos, find the ones that I like the most, get them into Photoshop and edit them to the point that I'm happy with. Sometimes the photos don't even need an edit, but at times like this where the colors are maybe slightly just a bit off, or if there's dust and things that are on some negatives, it's easy to remove them again with the generative features in Photoshop. And so once I've done all that, save them all, they can then be sent up to the client to be posted on socials. I'll obviously post them on my own socials too, and hopefully everyone's happy. So like I say, you can download Photoshop for yourself using the link in the description. I'll put it down there, so go and head down there to find yourself a copy of Photoshop. The new generative features on it are so helpful, and I just love it as an editing software. You can do anything. I'm sure you're aware of how powerful Photoshop is as a tool, but for me, it's the best out there. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and if you're a budding film photographer thinking about trying to make it into your career, I hope this was helpful for you. If you have any other questions at all, please do leave them in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. If there's anything you particularly want to learn or want to know, please let me know and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. If you're new around here and you're not subscribed, please do that. I post loads of film photography content, and please do like the video if you found it helpful as well. But until the next one, I suppose this is farewell. Thank you again for joining me, everybody. I'm Miles, and I will see you for another video here on Expired Film Club very, very soon. Farewell.